We've got a Simplicity Broadmoor 16 horse in here. Customer brought it in and said that it smells like gas when he tries to start it, and that the last time he used it, it sounded like the RPM started to kind of slow down, and that it wasn't running at full power. Now, he replaced the air filter, he replaced the fuel filter, the spark plug, and the fuel pump. Those didn't seem to help whatsoever. Now, this is a V-twin. He said spark plug, so I'm not sure both plugs were replaced. We will check that out. Most of the time, if you're smelling fuel, you may have an issue with the choke sticking or something like that. If you're moving your choke in and out, you do want to check where the cable comes, that everything is moving. Does seem to be the case here. Before you start any engine, you obviously want to check the oil. Now, if it's a case where the carburetor has failed and it's let fuel into your crankcase, sometimes that'll sit on top of the oil and it'll still look like a good level, but there'll be kind of a shiny gas above it. So if you smell that, a lot of times that'll tell you whether you have gas in your crankcase or not. It's very easy to miss, especially if you're out in the daylight without a, you know, if it's clear oil, if it's not real dark, it's real hard to miss that gas on top of it. We're gonna check this thing out completely and figure out what's going on. We did check the oil. We actually drove it in here. Didn't sound horrible when we drove it in, but you could definitely tell something's not right. Did smell like fuel. We'll do a full check out after we get the hood off here. Now, we know we don't have any fuel in the crankcase. We checked that, we smelled it, the level's good, everything there is good. So we think we don't have an issue with the carburetor at this point. Our choke is working. We can see it moving in and out pretty easily here as we're moving it. If you move the throttle up and down, you can look down on the inside and you should be able to see that throttle move also. Should be able to see it there if we're looking. All the way down on the inside. That should all be moving when you're moving your levers up at the top. Everything there seems fine. It seemed to throttle up and down fine. Let's look at the spark on each side now. If yours isn't starting, you obviously would like to, if you've got carburetor cleaner or starting fluid, if it's not starting, you can go ahead and spray some in the intake here beyond the air cleaner. Now, this looks like a new air cleaner, like you said. I always like to check anyway when we're doing anything. Sometimes people will tell you that, or somebody who worked on it will tell you they replaced it and then it's an old one with a new foam over it or something like that. We get a lot of those. Choke is working, as I can see here. Now, if it doesn't start, again, carburetor choke cleaner down in there with the choke open, and then you can close it or keep it half open as you try to start it. This one starts up fine. I'm going to start it up real quick, kind of show you guys what it sounds like, and then we're going to test the spark on both sides. We've got the spark checker here. It's great. If you don't, you can use an inline spark tester, or you can hold the spark plug to the side with a rag. Even if you have like an auxiliary one, just a new one, you can pull it out. Just kind of hold it to the side while you turn it over. Make sure you see spark in between the probe and the outlet if you're touching to the outside. Very easy way to do it without having to really mess with it. The only thing that doesn't tell you is if the spark plug in here is bad, if you're, you know, using a new one versus an old one that's still in it. Let's turn this over, see what happens. It's showing low on this side, the spark checker is, which means we may have an issue with the spark plug or the ignition coil or something like that. We're going to make sure these cylinders run independently now. A lot of times that'll tell you cylinder health or engine health as a whole if you just run them independently. This one we know had spark on it. We're gonna run it on that side real quick first. It fires up and runs on that side. Now this side said we had low spark. It was blinking like that. If we check the spark plug, just using a 5/8 socket. I believe a 16 also works. Oh, this is a 16. Now this spark plug doesn't look great. It's definitely not new. Looks like you might have missed this one. We're going to put our Briggs Stratton 491055T in it. And then we're going to try this again. So at this point we know that it's not running on one cylinder, or at least we think it's not running on one cylinder. Since it doesn't seem to be a carb issue, you know, if you're testing this and you give it a little bit of choke while it's running and it smooths out and starts running better, then you know you have an issue with the carburetor being dirty or some bad fuel or something like that. If it doesn't get better at that point, test your cylinders independently. See if one of them is not working with the other. Now 8 horsepower, that'll run this mower just fine, and it'll spin the blades and everything else. It'll kind of bog down whenever it gets, you know, tries to start the blades. Until you get into deep grass, a lot of times you won't notice it. If you're mowing an inch or so, people mow with these things for a long time on one cylinder without really noticing it, especially if it's different people mowing all the time. Very easy to miss. Let's test this other cylinder. Unplug that wire over there. Still getting nothing. A lot of times flashing low on here will mean that it's flooded out. I didn't see that at all. I didn't really see much liquid on the end. I'm gonna try holding this to the side. Seeing if we can get a good spark out of it that we can see. Not seeing any spark. I did think it was touching, but it might not have been. See if we can't prop it up under there a little better. Still not sure that's touching all the way. Anyway, it looks like, there we go. It's definitely touching. We're getting no spark whatsoever out of this side, even though it was showing blinking low. This side is not firing, and it won't run independently on this side because the spark is bad or weak. It's not getting any spark here whatsoever. At this point, if you're getting spark and one of your cylinders isn't running, you will want to pull the valve cover off and figure out what's going on inside. You likely have a valve stuck open, blown out head gasket. I mean, there's quite a few different things. We put, I'm not sure if this was the one. I'm pretty sure we put a compression tester on this side yesterday when we pulled it up. I think we got like 160 pounds out of it right off the bat, which is great for this old Simplicity. These engines, you know, normally last quite a while. The Vanguards will. I'm a big fan of them. We're going to take this top cover off real quick, and we're going to figure out why this thing isn't sparking on this side. Again, if you run each one independently, you'll know if it's one cylinder working independently, or you'll know if it's a fuel issue or a spark issue. The only other thing you have is compression and timing. Now, if one cylinder's running fine and the other one's not, it can't be a timing issue at that point. It's got to be an issue with something else. Now that we have it off, we can take a look and figure out exactly what's going on. I'm going to cut some of these zip ties. That one was brittle enough to begin with. Probably didn't need to cut it. Make sure you don't nick any wires. Cutters work well if you're not skilled with a knife. I don't really see any nicks in the wire where it could be grounding out anywhere. Kind of some strange. Yeah, that seems to be fine. What I'm leaning towards here is I'm leaning towards bad wiring diode between the ignition coils, or a bad ignition coil. We're going to test this by unplugging the wire from the ignition coil on this side. Now at this point, this is completely mechanical. If this magnet coming around goes over the top of this and there's a gap here, which there is, you can test that if you'd like by looking straight down in and shining light below it in between the coil here and the magnet. If you can see light, that's plenty fine. Some people like to sand them down. The magnetism isn't really affected at all by a little bit of surface rust on either side. Now there is where the coil attaches to the ground. If it's not grounded well, it could cause an issue like this also. Let's test out first and see what that coil being disconnected, what we end up actually getting. Just kind of jam that in there. That should be good enough. I think I got the other one unplugged just so it doesn't start. Seems to me like we're getting good spark at this point. That's what I see anyway. I'm going to plug this guy in. We should have enough fuel still in there. Either way, let me just throw that back in real quick. Other side's still unplugged. I just went ahead and choked it out to try to kill it. As we've disconnected this diode, this cylinder starts. The issue here is going to be the wiring going between the two coils. This prevents crosstalk. Now what I think was happening is that when this coil was actually sparking, it was making this coil spark at the same time, which was way premature. So it was showing a light pulse here, but it was not actually sparking like it should have been because it wasn't charged fully. We're gonna get this wiring ordered and we're gonna get this replaced, and then I'll take care of our issue. We have the 844-547 wire assembly in. We'll open it up here and get that installed. Now that's got both diodes. It's got a diode here for the far coil, and then a diode here for this side coil. Just kind of stretch that out. Should be about perfect. And then there is a clip. I already took this off. It's kind of hard to see, but on this piece, the metal piece that goes all the way around from here to there, right in the middle, there's a spot where this flips down and just slips down onto it, and this wire will go through it like such and then slip down onto that. Now it's going to be real hard for me to get any sort of angle with kind of how hard it is to reach down in there on this. I'm not going to worry too much about getting that angle, but that is how that sits down on there. This slides straight into the metal and just keeps it from sucking up and hitting the flywheel fan. Obviously is important. Let's get the old one out. Now at this point, if you've got that unplugged obviously and you're still not getting spark, you can go ahead and pull this coil off, and you can clean up the bottom side and clean up the mounts and re-secure it and re-gap it to the magnet. If that does not fix it and it still won't fire, you know, without something hooked up here and a good known plug, you know then that that is a bad coil. Pretty easy to diagnose that way. Well, I just lost my plastic piece, it looks like. Oh, it's down here at the bottom, okay. It's better than the alternative, I guess. Let's try to go through. I think I'm actually going to mess with putting this plastic piece on here in a little while. I'll make sure that that wire is out of the way for the video, but probably take me a good little while to get it back on. Oop, didn't work well. Right there in the spot I need to be. As soon as you kind of get it lined up, you can just push it on. You want to make sure you don't hurt those wires at all, though. Alright. Good to go. And then we will hook this here for the tab for the kill, and then this to this side, the short one. Perfect. Again, I'm going to just kind of poke this wire down in there, but you do want to make sure that that plastic piece is installed, you know, before you permanently put this thing back together. We've got a few other things to do to it anyway. We've got to blow out the whole thing, and I think we're maybe tuning it up and all that also. I'm going to unplug this side coil. we are going to fire this thing up. Sounds pretty good just running on one cylinder. Imagine how it's gonna sound here running on two. And that's what the customer said too. Without the loss of power and the gas smell, you know, it can still run along. And for people who aren't paying attention, again, get this. Of course, we're starting to get some good smoke from it. That side probably hasn't ran for at least a little while, according to the customer. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of information about how tricky these diodes can be, since the coil is actually still good, but the diode makes it to the point where it is not sparking. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.